Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Today is going to be the January wrap-up. These are all of the books that I have completed in the month of January and what I thought about them. Let's get into it. We are going to start with the book that I finished most recently and go to the one that was the first book that I finished this month. The book I finished most recently was Jawbone by Megan Greeley. This is the shortest science fiction book on my TBR, according to Goodreads anyway. Let's talk about the character. The character didn't bring anything new to the table. Now, she was relatable, but she's like any other character that you're going to read in literary fiction, especially weird girl fiction, sad girl lit, mentally ill girl, did I say that? Mentally ill girl lit. Those kind of genres that are so popular right now. This is kind of more of a speculative take, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, relatable, and I did enjoy reading from her, but she's not going to be that memorable. This is a nameless narrator as well. The atmosphere had a lot of potential. In this book, our character goes to a cottage by the sea and locks herself away, even does like the dark curtains where it doesn't let sunlight in, all around this cottage because she wants to be in isolation, and she is recording this audition to be able to be one of the first people sent to colonize Mars. That had so much potential, but it was not utilized. We had some of it at the start, but for the majority of the book, we don't see any of that. The writing, this one is, I do like the tone. It's dark humor. It's comedic. It is vulgar though, so I think a lot of people might be turned off by that. Vulgar, dark sense of humor is very popular right now. If you're not into that kind of writing style, it's not going to be for you. But also, it was very hard to follow at first. I did struggle. I was like, where are we going? It's very short little snippets, and I was having a hard time seeing how they all flowed together, but I did get more used to it as the book went on. Let's talk about the plot. Again, it's not really different from any literary fiction. This that you read, the description of the book, if you go look this book up online, take that with a grain of salt. This is really any other literary story of a young woman trying to find herself, trying to make sense of her romantic relationships, her friendships, her career. It's a story we've all read plenty of times if you read literary contemporary fiction. Sure, there's a contest to be sent to Mars, but that doesn't play a huge part at all. This isn't really that much of a sci-fi like it was. It has such a big emphasis on Mars on the back, and I mean, look at the red and everything. You would think this is going to be more speculative than it was, but it wasn't really. So this is one I'd recommend with a maybe. Next book that I finished was a mood read, and that is the Mozart Code by Rachel McMillan. With these characters, again, so much potential, but they were ultimately one-dimensional. Simon was the character that I found to be the one with the most potential. There's all these layers to him that I wish we could have unraveled more. We have our female main character, what is her name, Sophia or Sophie. She was a Mary Sue, too perfect. She knew how to do everything right. She's so beautiful, striking, very tall, so different than any of the other women. But there were parts with their relationship with this other couple who are their friends. I don't understand why that couple was there. I don't understand why Simon was responsible for them. I wish this would have built on the relationships a little bit more. With the atmosphere, this is taking place in post-war Vienna and Prague, which is a very unique setting that I hadn't read from before, and I did really enjoy that. Now, there was a bit of info dumping at the start of the book as the author is getting us adjusted to this setting, because I'm assuming that a lot of people haven't read about this place at that time period, so the author did do a good job at building that history, and this is almost a love letter to that time and place as well, because I learned so much about these cities, this part of the world. What was a little bit shocking about this book with the writing, or more so the format, is we had two timelines. We had the timeline of when Simon and Sophia first met in pre-war Britain, and then we had the present day timeline that is in post-war Vienna. I usually love a dual timeline, but here I didn't really care about what was happening in the 1930s in England. I wanted to be focused on what was happening in Vienna. Let's talk about the plot. This one, it was predictable. I did predict some of the major, what I consider the major plot line of the story, but I do think this is great if you're predominantly a romance reader and want to dabble your toes into thrillers or historical fiction. This one does a great job at bending genres, and I think this is a good entryway piece to people wanting to try new genres, and I think that's awesome when a book can do that. Something else with the plot is Vienna was a city that could fall either way. It could fall into communism, or it could fall into aligning with the Allied cities in the West. We have multiple different countries, Russia, America, Britain, all coming in, trying to influence the election one way or another, not really caring what the people of Austria wanted for their country. Russia, America, Britain, they were wanting what was best for their own countries, not caring about what the Austrian people wanted. I had no idea that anything like that was happening in these countries after the fall of Nazism, so that was incredibly fascinating and eye-opening to read about. This is one that I would recommend with a maybe. We have a poetry collection now, and that is Thrall by Natasha Treleaven. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She was also the 19th Poet Laureate, again, don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, of the United States. I can appreciate what the poet was trying to do with this collection. She is a woman who is mixed race. Her father is white. This was taking her own story, but also looking how mixed race children with white fathers have been viewed through culture, society, and history. She would take a painting, which on the back of the book doesn't say anything about that, so she would take a painting that had those themes that I was just talking about and tell the story of that painting, which again, I think that's such a great idea, but a lot of these paintings I had never heard of, so I'm like, okay, taking your word for it, that's what this is about. But she did do a good job at painting an image in my head, but I wish I would have had an image of said painting that the poem was based on. It doesn't include that. If I had known that before I started, I would have went and looked up the paintings, but again, nowhere does it say that that is what this book is trying to do. But I do think the author did do a good job, and I do think the poems are quite well. This is one that I would recommend with a maybe. Our next one is a book that I carried over from December and was my nonfiction pick in December, and that is When Women Ruled the World by Cara Cooney. This is the 6 Queens of Egypt. The description of this book, this is kind of false advertising. I thought it was going to be like the Egyptians loved having a female ruler, that was seen as the norm for them, but no, they only went to a female ruler. Worst case scenario, there's nobody else to rule, or there's been times of violence and they viewed women as the less violent sex and put a woman on the throne, made her pharaoh of Egypt. It was, again, a worst case scenario situation of you have nobody else to rule, let's put this woman on the throne. It wasn't like, oh, that's the Pharaoh's oldest child, she's going to be the next pharaoh. No, that's not how it worked. And with a lot of these queens, I'm going to say half of them that are included in this book, I don't think there's enough evidence, there's not enough information to have a substantial book. And that's no fault of the author, it's just because that was 5,000 years ago. We don't have that much information. A lot of these women, half of them, as I said, are going to be pretty much forgettable for me. It's not going to stick with me too much. Now, we did have Cleopatra the 7th in here, who is the Cleopatra who most of us hear about. If you're a Roman fan, if you're a fan of the Roman Empire, this is very Egyptian. Not a big fan of the Romans. Not a big fan of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Augustus. So let me tell y'all, I'm warning y'all that the author is not a big fan of them. Which was fun to kind of see the Egyptian standpoint. Something else that was very unique and something that I haven't really seen in a history nonfiction book is that it was taking, again, politics from 5,000 years ago, comparing it to modern times, to like the 2016 election and other parts of the world as well, not just America. And I thought that was really interesting, comparing just how female rulers have been viewed in history and how that has changed, or in some parts have not changed that much. I thought that was really interesting and intriguing because I've never really read a book that has done that before. This is another one that I would recommend with a maybe. After all those maybes, we've come to a 5-star. That is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman and translated by Ross Swartz. This one I loved. I've been telling everybody about it. I read it with my book club here on YouTube and over on the Fable app. So if you guys would like my spoilery thoughts, the link to Fable is down below because I do go into my spoilers, but I did vlog my experience reading the book as well. There's 39 women in a bunker, windowless bunker, underground. This little girl got put in there with them, so there's 40 of them, but she's the only one who is a child when all the others are adults. They don't know why she's there. They don't even know if one of them could be her mother because they have very vague memories of what life was like before they were put into the bunker. They're really uncovering a lot of stuff as the characters are, and that is something that I love. Also, this is the other book this month that had a nameless narrator, so I thought that was cool that 2 books I read this month had nameless narrators. The character finds herself, we are finding her as well. We are developing as the character development, or as the character develops. But I do think the character work and the plot are very interconnected in this, because what we are doing here is we are taking humanity, stripping it to its core, and seeing what is it that makes us human. Because the little girl, all she has known is this bunker. She hasn't even seen the sun before. Is she human other than being biologically human? There's so many good questions that are brought up in this book. Also questions of what it means to be a woman, because the majority of our characters in this book, a handful are male, but they're not really substantial to the story. And I loved that. I loved seeing this kind of society they made up of all the 40 women. Now, the atmosphere. How could I find this book beautiful? They're first in a bunker, and then they're in a very gritty world that might not even be our world. But the way the author writes it, and it's freedom is a word that I think of when I think of the atmosphere, and seeing how women grow and what they develop without the societal norms that we have put on them, that our society on earth has put on women. Seeing how if you take a group of women, put them out in the wild, essentially, seeing what they come up with, because as I said, their memories of Earth of the time before are very vague, and seeing how society is formed, that's something with a lot of dystopian books. I get really primitive vibes from, like, to me, I made a comparison of Clan of the Cave Bear. Is a book that takes place tens of thousands of years ago, but again, it's kind of stripping humanity down to its core and trying to find what makes us human. Now, the writing was where I kind of struggled, where I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a 5-star, but obviously I gave the book time, and by the end I just felt so much, but we'll get to that. With the writing, it is stream of consciousness, so it's not going to be for everybody. Now, I luckily did this as the audiobook, and the audiobook does have it put into parts, because if you read this physically, there's no chapters or anything. There's the book, and then there's the afterword, and that's all you get. But as I said, the audiobook did put it into parts for me, so that was very helpful. Shout out to the audiobook creators. But I do know reading this physically might be a bit much for some people, and even if I read it physically, would I have given this a 5-star? I don't know, because I didn't read it physically. There were also parts, because as I said, our main character, she doesn't have any memory of going to school. She doesn't know how to tell time. She doesn't know how to do math. She doesn't know how to read and write. So she's being taught those things. And those are little things that we take for granted. I'm going to say the majority of the people watching this video know how to read and write and do that kind of stuff. And as I was saying, that we take that for granted. So reading somebody learning how to do all of that can be kind of tedious, because it's like, yeah, that's how you tell time. That's how time works. That's how addition works. But that got kind of tedious to read from. And then Miss Tony, who's in my book club, she also mentioned that she had to, I almost forget, is it suspend your belief or disbelief for some of those instances? And yeah, I would agree with that it's kind of like, okay, she got a hold of that very quickly of understanding how to do that. So I definitely can see that as well. But I didn't have the words to say it until Miss Tony said that, so shout out to her. As I said, the plot and the character work are very much interconnected, as I do think this is showing what it means to be a human and what it means to be a woman as well. I absolutely love this book. I had no idea where it was going to go, and I was making theories all throughout, and you can see them over on Fable, but I loved making the theories and just thinking about this book. I'm still thinking about it a few weeks later, and as you can see, I did annotate it. Don't know how well that's going to focus for y'all, but I did. I loved my reading experience reading this book, and I highly, highly recommend it. And this was one of those ones, after I finished it, I felt so hollow. I felt, well, one, this made me love being a woman. I wouldn't want to be anything else. Womanhood. I love it so much, and I loved that. I would say this is a piece of feminist literature. But at the same time, I felt so sad and despair for these characters that they were put in this situation. So feeling hollow is the best way to describe it for me, where I just wanted to stare at the wall. I wanted to cry. I didn't cry, but I felt depressed after reading it. It was such a mix of emotions after finishing this book, and that's when I was like, yeah, this is a 5-star. The new year was over the weekend. I started the year by reading a graphic novel, which it can be a graphic novel, it can be a children's book, but just a book that is told predominantly in pictures. And this is a book that I got for Christmas in, I think, 2024, and that is Joseph and Chico, The Life of Pope Benedict the 16th, as told by a cat, with an introduction by Father George Gunswine. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And this is by Jeannie Perego and Dunata Dal Molin Casagrande. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of these names, but I think this book is great if you have a child who might be asking questions of how the Pope is chosen, because we do have an American Pope now, so I'm sure a lot of American children are fascinated because maybe one day they want to be a Pope. That would be kind of a cool job, right? So I do think this story would be great if somebody, a kid, and even myself, I didn't really know how one got into this path of work, I guess. That if they have questions about how one becomes a pope or how all of that works. And I mean, this is a great story of this young man who grew up in Germany, again, during the war years. Yeah, it's extremely difficult. He had such a journey that he had to go through. And also, I think it is important to learn about different religions. Now, I'm not Catholic personally, but I have friends who are Catholic. My dad went to Catholic school, so I think it's a great way to learn about other denominations or other religions, because I do think it's important to understand why people believe the things that they believe, even if that's not something necessarily that you believe in. I think it's important to learn. I think it makes you empathetic. But I do think this is really cute how we can learn not just from humans, but from animals as well. And the Pope was an animal lover. I do think this was a cute way to tell this story. And there's so many lessons that can be learned from humans and animals alike. Those are all of the books that I have completed so far in the month of January. I do think I'll probably finish about 2 more, so stay tuned to my vlogs and my other bookish social media. That is always linked down below in the description of the video. But if you made it through this whole video, leave a snow emoji in the comments below. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. I'll see you in my next one. Bye! If you are familiar with my videos, you're used to seeing Sherman at the end of them. Sadly, Sherman has since passed away, but I would still like to encourage you guys to help your local shelters. Sherman was at the Darlington County Humane Society in rural South Carolina. I always have their link down below in the description if you guys would like to help them, but also help your local shelters as well. You can do that by donating, sharing posts like this one, volunteering, fostering, and adopting, which it's great to do all of those things. Great to help your community, great to help the animals in your community, and I cannot recommend it enough. All of my pets were rescues, they were strays or from animal shelters,
And I love them so much, and I know how much love they can give. So knowing these pets at the shelter can equally give that much love, it's amazing. And y'all should totally take part and help out those local animal shelter pets, and please help them.